everyone, and welcome to this HVG event, April 2024. It's lovely to see you here. Whether you're watching it as a recording or here live, thank you so much for coming along. Today's session's all about looking at our new partnership, HVG's new partnership with Team Kinetic, and what Team Kinetic can offer us as an organisation and us individually within our own businesses. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to HVG Chair Matt to introduce the partnership as an organisation. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Rhiannon, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. It's great that you're able to be with us for what is the first of this new financial year's programme of HVG events, which are sponsored by Team Kinetic. And hopefully, as you are all aware, last year we introduced a brand new strategy for HVG, new roadmap for where we're going in the future. And that strategy sets out our ambition to inspire transformative volunteering across the heritage sector by enabling the heritage sector to realise the potential of volunteering to transform organisations, lives and communities. Nice and simple. Or, of course, it isn't. And that is why to deliver on this vision and mission, we are looking to work with partners that share our goals and ambitions for the sector, but also share our values as well. And that is why we're so delighted to be working with Team Kinetic this year. It's a partnership that we hope that beyond bringing important finances to the organisation that will help us deliver more and help us deliver that vision, but which will also help us develop our relationship, bring to you events like today that benefit the sector, and which will also give Team Kinetic a platform to engage more easily, more deeply with the heritage sector as well. Like I say, Team Kinetic are an organisation that really share our ambitions and values, and that's why we're so proud to be working with them, both on the sponsorship of our events programme and actually also the sponsorship of our conference, which is taking place, date for your diary, on the 26th and 27th of November. Don't worry, I am not going to go into our vision and strategy too much today. All I wanted to say was thank you to Chris and the team at Team Kinetic for sponsoring HVG. It's really an important relationship to us, and it will help us go a long way to, as I say, delivering that strategy in the future. So thank you, Chris, and I'll pass over to you now.
Thanks, Matt. I will see if I can drive my presentation and chat at the same time. So just a very quick agenda there for what we're going to cover today. Matt's kindly sort of introduced what he hopes HVG is going to get from this relationship. But I guess for us, it was worth, just made the chat really big and now I can't make it small. Hang on a second. But too many buttons to press. There we go. That's better. Okay. So, why do we want to work with HVG? Why do we think they're a great organisation? I guess if we start with just before Christmas, Kate, who's on the call from Manchester, was kind enough to invite me to one of your regional meetings. And I've got to say, HVG is an organisation we've known for quite a long time. You're one of the well-established sort of, you see, if you would volunteer manager groups that are out there. So we've sort of admired your work from afar for quite some time. But when Kate did invite me to that session before Christmas, it was just amazing to see the passion in the room. People in the room were all passionate about heritage. That was clear. But equally, if not more so, they're passionate about people and unlocking that potential and inspiring engagement. And it really sort of it made me feel quite good about the sector I've been lucky enough to work in, and it really did sort of make me want to get involved more directly with the work that HVG do. So when the opportunity did come up, and Matt and Vanessa got in touch with me and said, "Well, we'd be interested in supporting the work that you guys have on offer." I think they were surprised by how quickly I said yes. And the level of support I was keen to offer, because we at Team Kinetic we have a very clear mission to try and leave the sector in a better state than we found it. It's sort of fundamental to the way we operate as a company, and an organization, a group like HVG provides with such a rich opportunity to meet the people that are doing the job, making a difference. And, we feel that, that technology has an important part to play in the future of volunteering. We know that volunteering is under pressure from all these different headwinds. And, as a younger generation comes through, we know that technology is going to play an important part, but technology is only one part, and it's with your knowledge and with your experience and the fabulous work you guys do that we feel we can create an environment that's more welcoming, more open, more accessible for volunteers. So that's really sort of, I wanted to start with that, what we thought, where we see the value in working with you guys as an organization. I guess to tell you a little bit about us and who we are, it's a pretty straightforward sort of mission statement we started with back in 2007, 2008. When we looked at what was happening back then, the iPhone was still quite new. Facebook, wasn't this dark, horrible force that was destroying the world. It was still quite an exciting place to be. But we could see these new technologies were popping up. When you looked at what was happening back then, volunteering was still quite what we would call old school web 1.0, which is you had to go somewhere, fill in a form, speak to somebody. And we're not sort of saying that as a negative and those things shouldn't still happen, that, volunteering is still very much about people. But we saw this role for making technology, using technology to make volunteering easier, making it easier to actually volunteer, making it easier for people to be able to volunteer whenever they want, wherever they want, all the time, everywhere. And that's remained very much our mission. And we've got our mission statement up there. But fundamentally, what we're here for, what we see our role as Team Kinetic is to make your lives as volunteer managers easier, to make the lives of your volunteers easier, and to make volunteering as a pastime, as a thing you do, more straightforward. You can see some of the heritage organisations we currently already work with. We see heritage as a really good fit for Team Kinetic. Team Kinetic is really well suited when you have a certain level of formality, and all the volunteer management systems you'll bump into have a similar profile of the kind of volunteer they work with really well, where there's a little bit of formality, there is some requirements for onboarding, there's some requirements for a pathway for the volunteer to follow. You can't, you need the volunteer to do certain actions and you want them to at certain times. Volunteer Team Kinetic fits that particularly well, and there's a whole range of customers we're already working with there. Just to give you a sense of the different scales of customers, we've got organisations that have 10 to 15 volunteers, all the way up to organisations that have got 30 to 40,000 volunteers working with us. So we've got a real range of organisations that have taken advantage of our product. And we've got a product version that's suitable for all those different sized organizations as well. So it's not a one size fits all. We appreciate that your small, the small castle in the north of Scotland being one example, with 20 really hardcore volunteers, up to the Wildlife Trust, the Royal Wildlife Trust for the UK. They're quite different organizations. And we've made sure we've built a product that's suitable in those different contexts, suitable in those different situations. We talk about volunteer management systems, VMSs. We're trying to change that a little bit. We're talking now about volunteer engagement and management systems. So we think that word engagement is a really important word in understanding what these systems should offer. There is a HR element, there is a marketing element, there is a reporting and evaluation element, and there is a reward and recognition. So we broke it down into the 4 M's: the mobilize, the manage, the measure, and the motivate. I forgot the 4th M was for a second then. Fundamentally, it's an online volunteer database. It helps you mobilize your volunteers through creating really beautiful adverts that you can add pictures to, and badges and descriptions and links and documents that can also be pushed out to other third-party systems like Volunteer Scotland, Volunteering Wales, and now, as of the next couple of weeks, doit.org. So you can leverage your opportunity data within Team Kinetic out to these other platforms. And when your volunteers find those adverts, it bounces them back to your platform where they can be registered in a really straightforward registration process that you've got control over. You own their data. You have that volunteer then within your system to manage and use as you see fit. Once you've got your volunteers into the system, you want to make sure that they've been appropriately onboarded, they've been appropriately trained. You want to be able to communicate with them using SMS, text message, direct messaging. You want to keep your volunteers informed of their progress at every step of their journey, and all the way through to them being deployed and getting feedback on their experience at the other end of that deployment. All of that data, so you know who they are, what they're doing, when they're doing it, how much of they're doing it, all those data points, we want to present them to you in a way that allows you to effectively measure the impact of your volunteering, to measure and audit the experience the volunteers are having. So you know that your processes are working, you know that you've got the appropriate governance in place. And finally, we want to inspire your volunteers to do more, to help you recruit more volunteers. So we've developed links to products like Tempo time credits. We have our trade vouchers. We've got the ability to create volunteer awards and badges. We can say thank you to volunteers. We give volunteers thumbs up. We're trying to make it as easy as possible, as I said at the start, for you to be the best volunteer manager your volunteers could possibly hope for. But all the volunteer management systems that you're going to come across will contain versions of the same thing we've talked about here. So a lot of that stuff, our competitors offer very similar features, and we are quite lucky in the UK. There is some really good products out there. We're very keen to make sure, that you find the right product fit for what you're looking for. So, what makes us a bit different? Why do you think we might be a good fit for you guys? Fundamentally, as I said right at the start, we put the sector at the heart of everything we do, be that working with yourselves, our partnership with the Association of Volunteer Managers, our partnership with the Charity Retail Association. We look to work with sector experts to make sure that everything we do has the sector at heart. It's co-designed with the sector, and it's based on a deep understanding of what the sector needs. The other thing we think we're different to our competitors, our system is so easy to use, really easy to implement. We can have you up and running in a couple of weeks. We have your data migrated and have your volunteers volunteering in next to no time. When I chat to Kate in a minute, she could tell you about some of the challenges around starting when you use one of these systems, because it does come with some challenges, but we provide basically a hand-holding service. We know volunteer managers don't tend to be the most, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't tend to be the most technically motivated. They tend to be more people, I would argue. So we're there to make sure that we take away all that technical pain for you and try and make your life as simple as possible. The big difference, one of the really big differences between Kinetic and all our competitors, is our pricing model is super simple. It's a fixed price. If you have 5 volunteers, 500 volunteers, 5 million volunteers, 50 million volunteers, we will not change your price. We will definitely not change the way you're billed. So volunteer numbers, volunteer registrations make no impact on the price. The number of opportunities shared makes no difference on the price. The only thing we price based on is the product type you have and the number of admin users you require. So it's no surprises, no worries at the end of the year that you may have gone over some arbitrary limit of 500 volunteers or whatever it happens to be. With us, it's really straightforward. You know what you're paying and you know what you get for that money. And it just takes all that fear and worry out of there. You talked about future-proofing here as a big difference. And again, our competitors are always updating their product. But again, this commitment to the sector, we've been working with a series of partners looking at how we can create a more open sector as a whole. So we've been working around this idea of creating a data standard for volunteering opportunities. We've been working with people like Do It, Volunteering Wales and Volunteer Scotland around establishing some standards that the sector can adopt, which makes it easier to share volunteer opportunity data between platforms. On top of that, we've got our new app that we just launched. On top of that, we do 3 updates a year. What you can be sure of with a product like ours is the product never stands still. And we work with our customers to build a roadmap around the kind of things you'd like to see. And that's the kind of things that get included in each of our little updates that happen 3 times a year. And the final big one is we want you to have the safest place possible for you and your volunteers. So at Team Kinetic, we committed very heavily on a whole range of tools around audit, safeguarding, DBS checking, referencing, all those tools. They're built into the product. They're really robust. They're really well tested. And I will show you a couple more things just to do with them very, very shortly. I mentioned our mobile app. we're quite proud of this. We only launched it last week, the week before. I think 2 weeks ago. It's a brand new app. It's you can have it white labeled, so you can have your own app in the App Store, which is great. You know, you can have your own volunteer with app. It's free to use for your volunteers. We have a free version of our app and a paid for version, depending on if you want the white label or not. All the features, bar one or two, from our desktop version are in our app. It's available on Android. It's available on iOS. It's got this great new fresh design in there. And in terms of accessibility, we got the results back this morning, and it turns out that we've just hit the accessibility standard of 2.2 AA, which will mean nothing to anybody, but that's pretty good, and we're quite happy with that. So, and I mentioned the safeguarding, audit, and compliance. It's been a big part of the Team Kinetic sort of journey that we think that your volunteers need to be as safe as they can be, and you as organisations need to make sure that your reputation is protected as best as it can be online. These digital systems do come with a certain level of risk that you may not know your volunteers quite as well as you did before, because a lot of the interactions may be happening now online that previously may have happened on the phone or in person. So making sure that any system you decide to deploy provides you with the confidence that your volunteers are in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time is really important. One of the biggest updates we've made to our system most recently is the fact you can undertake DBS within the Team Kinetic product. You don't leave Team Kinetic to undertake your DBS. The check can be done, the result comes back in, and it's all updated automatically. And we can beat almost anybody on price of doing those DBSs, which is quite cool. We've got tools to verify people's passport, to verify people's identification and their address. We can create ID badges with QR codes embedded in them. We can lock photographs and create passes out of those photographs. We've got a referencing module, so if you do character references, that's all built in. There's no chasing up references anymore. I know that's a massive pain for volunteer managers. And there's a whole range of stuff around uploading qualifications and checking when those dates going out of date, and creating a whole range of restrictions and controls about which volunteer can access which opportunity at which time. And our little coming soon at the bottom there as well, we've got a really exciting set of features around this idea of personal data stores. The current world we live in is a lot of the data lives within your system. And we see a future where volunteers will have more ownership of their own data, and they'll be able to hold that data in a personal data store on their phone. And if they go from one museum or one heritage organisation to another, they can take some of that personal data with them and share it with other systems they go to. So we're looking at this idea of I'm not going to say those poison words of volunteer. I'm going to say volunteer passports. We're taking them on a bit further than that. This idea that a volunteer has ownership of their own data and they can take it in and out of the systems with them if they want to. Now, that's all on me giving you the whole, we're great pitch. But I always feel these things are much more impactful, much more useful to you guys if you can have a chat with some of our existing customers. So if everyone's okay, I'd like to introduce Kate Glynn from Manchester Museum and Kirsty Haslam from Historic Environment Scotland. Do you want to say hello, ladies? Are you happy to give us a little wave?
Hello, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces.
So I've just got a couple of questions. I've just got a couple of questions to ask you both, because I think it sounds much better if it comes from you guys than us. If we start, Kate, why did you initially opt for a volunteer management system? What were the driving factors for yourself when you decided to go down this route?
Well, first of all, I love how you very, very carefully describe us as not being very IT literate. I was waiting.
I wasn't looking at anyone in particular.
Not directed at me whatsoever. I think it just felt like the right time for us at the museum. So we were actually closed, and I guess that in itself came with its challenges. But we'd kind of just gone through COVID. We were in the middle of a capital project, and it just felt like the right time for us. Lots of my colleagues, some of them had used various different management tools for a while, and it just felt like the right time. We were coming back as a bigger museum, more volunteers, and it just felt like the right time for us. And it felt like we'd gone beyond using Excel spreadsheets. There was lots of things around data and how we stored things effectively. So that's kind of like where we joined it at.
And Kirsty, I know you've come in a little bit after the initial decision to go with Team Kinetic, but you know, from a sort of historic environment Scotland standpoint, what do you think the challenges they were facing were, and why do you think that they chose to go down the route of going digital, shall we say?
Yes, so I'm very aware. So I've come in as a maternity cover for one of my colleagues, but very aware it was, for us, it was a lot around streamlining our communication processes, I think. So we have obviously different volunteer managers and volunteer coordinators across the different sites that we look after, and across the different areas and work streams that we have across the Strong Environment Scotland, and a lot of them were holding sort of contact information as absolutely appropriately, but you know, at a local level. So it was, for us, it was about really looking to streamline our communication process in a secure way. I know that was certainly part of a huge part of the conversation that we were having at the time.
I think that's a really interesting point you've just made there as well, Kirsty, is that over the years of us talking to organisations as they start to look at volunteer management systems and volunteer engagement systems, often the volunteer manager looks at it, this can make my life, make my life easier, and there can be a better volunteer experience. But what we've tended to find that help you get the business case over the line is slightly looking at it from the risk perspective, which is, are you holding data in a safe manner? Are you GDPR compliant? Have you got the appropriate volunteer audit trail, that they are doing the right job and they've had the right training? That unfortunately, they're looking at the world through this will be better for my volunteer. It doesn't necessarily always get you the response you want at a board level to help you build the business case you're after. And having a look at it from that risk point of view, and the risk that you want to mitigate, can be quite impactful. Kate, what was the sort of, why did you think Team Kinetic was the right product fit for yourselves?
So I was in a kind of quite a lucky position, really, because I think I just got back off maternity leave, and one of my colleagues over at the Whitworth, and I think another few colleagues in Manchester have done a bit of a scoping exercise about the different types of volunteer management systems that were out there. And obviously Team Kinetic came out highly, and that's who they'd gone with. And I think as well, from a sort of Manchester perspective, you guys are from Manchester, and you're so local, like your offices were just around the back of really where the museum is. So I think that helped as well. But yeah, it's definitely like I say, it had been scoped out and it had come up popular. And I think your relationship with Manchester City Council, I think that also existed as well. So you were very well established in the city as well. So it was definitely kind of like, it felt like the right place to go for us.
And Kirsty, you're in the midst of this now. So what would you be telling a future volunteer manager who's thinking about going down this route and implementing a new system? What are the lessons learned over the last couple of months?
So in terms of lessons learned, obviously, I think what it's important to recognise, and you'll all be aware of this, is the sort of time that absolutely the implementation of Team Kinetic is straightforward. It's a straightforward system, but yes, we recognise we're not maybe all the most computer literate, so it is very straightforward and logical from that point of view. But obviously, it does. The more time you can put into building the sort of back end, obviously, the more straightforward that journey then becomes for your both your volunteer managers and your volunteers, but also the time that it can take to implement a sort of rollout for volunteers across for volunteers and volunteer managers, making sure that they're all on board with the new system and engaging with them. So I think that's probably I guess we're aware it was always going to take time. That's probably something just to make sure that we're all factoring in as discussions take place.
And Kate, sort of similar question to yourself. We've worked with you for 2 years, but we started the process before COVID. Then COVID hit. So, what would you say your experience was with in terms of sort of rolling out the software? What would you say you learned from the whole process?
I'd say our journey was a little bit unusual, really, because we did kind of like properly kind of get on board with the system when we were closed and the museum wasn't open.
And then close the museum.
Yeah, with hardly any volunteers, which obviously is not practical. And if I'm honest, I did struggle with it a little bit. And looking back now, it wasn't because of the system, and it wasn't because you do need like great IT skills. It was just because I didn't have I didn't have sessions, I didn't have many volunteers. So when you turn on something and you just see all these different categories and you've just got nothing really to input, I was just a bit like, I want to get it all ready for when we reopen, but I've got nothing to put into it. So yeah, if I'm honest, I did struggle with it a little bit, and I'd have breaks and come back to it. So I definitely wouldn't recommend starting it if your museum's not kind of open with volunteers, because literally we reopened in February 23, and in January, just before we reopened, I was actually stuck at home with COVID, and I had all these new volunteers that were just taken on board. I had all these rotas that I had to input, and it probably took me about 2 days to get my head around it. Because as soon as you've got volunteers to input, as soon as you've got sessions to put on, opportunities, all of that kind of thing, then it is just, it's really easy just to kind of get to grips with. So yeah, I will hold my hands up and say it wasn't ideal starting that journey when we were closed. But I think how quickly, and I think I can maybe say that I've impressed Chris and Steve at times with how quickly I did end up picking it up after that initial kind of like slow start. But I think that just goes to show that the software is really easy to pick up, and I'm sure Chris will ask this, but yeah, the volunteers also picked it up really quickly too.
And that's my next question, really. So you beat me to it, Kate. How have the volunteers found using a system like ours?
I mean, I'd say there's always a couple that obviously, they don't really do emails. I mean, I had a guy last week say he turned up when an exhibition had closed, and I was just like, I've sent you like 20 plus emails about this. He was like, oh yeah, I need to sort me in with that. So you'll always have those volunteers that don't really engage like with emails and systems and stuff like that. But I know I'd say that's probably like less than 5% at the museum. Like the majority of them are really on board with it, and it, obviously it helps people sign up. And I mean, I won't go too much into detail, but in January we decided to kind of like manage our recruitment without Team Kinetic, because we kind of didn't really want like this huge pool of volunteers that weren't volunteers within the system. So we thought we'll just go back to old school. We'll do it on Excel. We'll do it on Google Docs. And I've said to Chris, it was an absolute disaster. We'd done it the first 2 times with Team Kinetic, and it was so slick. We knew who was coming in, when they were coming in. We could cancel sessions, and everything was just there. We took it off, and yeah, it just fell apart, because when we needed to cancel something, we didn't have everything, and we were back to emails. So yeah, it really does kind of like change the way you manage that kind of engagement with volunteers from day one, really.
I think, I mean, you brought up a really nice point there for us, Kate, as well. You decided to not use Team Kinetic at that point, and when we had as we try and speak to our customers as regularly as we can, and Kate told me that she decided to do this. What it actually started was a really interesting conversation between ourselves and Kate, and as to why she decided to do that, and the fact that she was a bit worried about all these inactive volunteers sat in the database. And we had a good chat about why she was worried about that and what we could do to maybe change the way the product works for her to work more effectively. So there's always a two-way conversation with ourselves and all our customers that are using the product to try and work out if it's working in the right way, if it's set up right, if we've got the right options available. The product is, I mean, it's established and it works well, but we're not averse to having those conversations with our customers about where it could work better. And I think that's a really nice example where we sort of had that conversation.
I really appreciate that. And I know this is a bit of a kind of like contentious issue between the two of us, because we literally reopened last year and we ended up with 1,000 volunteers on our Team Kinetic, and obviously a lot of them had just registered and we'd not met them, and I was just like, I can't be logging in and seeing all these people. So I was really honest with Chris, and like I say, they're really receptive to how they really want to make the system work for you. So yeah, so I tried it my way, and yeah, I think that's an ongoing discussion, isn't it? Not quite solved the problem.
I like that Kate's maybe the only volunteer manager in the country at the minute, complaining she's got too many volunteers to work with.
We're so popular here at the museum.
I know you're at a much earlier stage in the journey, but how have your volunteers taken to it so far?
as Kate says, it's it's mixed. We have volunteers who think this are straight on it as soon as we look to roll it out at their individual site. They were signing up, they're really engaging it, they're logging hours, really really enjoying the process. We will have volunteers. We are in the process of rolling this out to our current volunteers, and given we're quite a with lots of different sites across the organisation, it will carry on taking a little bit of time. So we will have some volunteers who will find the onboard, the sort of bringing on board process a bit, they'll be a bit slower. It's often the volunteers you don't expect. There are volunteers you're like, oh, they might take a little bit of coaxing, and actually they're often the ones who are straight on it and really enjoying the process. So it is varied, and that probably just goes back to that kind of factoring in the time and making sure you're having the conversations and that your volunteer managers are really engaged with that are really engaged with the process and know how to support volunteers. But actually, when the volunteers have been brought on board, they've been really enjoying it.
I think as well, you're going to be one of our first white label versions of the app that'll be coming out in the next month or so, which is quite exciting. So you'll have your own
looking forward to
that. Yeah. Couple more very quick ones. How generally have you found the support that we've been able to offer? What would you have to say about the way that sort of the team here are able to support you guys?
I think that's the thing that I'd recommend the most, to be honest, because you guys are just always at the end of an email, you're always at the end of a phone call, you're really happy to meet. It doesn't feel like there's any sort of real restriction on that. And in terms of the technical support on the system, is it Roll? Some weeks I contact him a lot, but again, that's more because I'm trying to get the most out of the system, and he always gets back like within a few hours. So yeah, I'd say the support is like a huge kind of like selling point for me, and something that I'd really recommend.
Absolutely, I'd say the same thing. I've obviously come into this process sort of halfway through our rollout, and I found that the team are really supportive as I pick it up, that they're really patient with me as I get to grips with the system that is new to me, and really sort of generous with their time. So I would echo Kate.
But yeah, patience is a good word.
Just noticed in the questions a request to see an example of the site. So just give me 2 seconds and I will open up Kate's site. We can see it in action. You guys, you can all still see that screen.
It might be worth saying as well, Chris, that another
so
thing that
this is one example. Sorry, go on, Kate.
I was just about to say that I also use the system to manage my HVG Northwest network as well. So I kind of like co-chair the Heritage Volunteer Group in the Northwest, and I have all my kind of like fellow colleagues signed up to Team Kinetic, and that's how I communicate with them. So that there's scope to do that as well, which is really useful, as well as obviously managing your volunteers.
Yeah. And I've got to say, I really enjoyed coming along to your meeting. It was great, and a great lunch as well that came with it. So, the secret to any good meeting, I reckon. The example you're looking at here is one of our templates. We have a number of different templates of how you may want the site to look. The site is white label, which means you add your own branding. The emails come from the site, look and feel like your emails. The comms that are coming out of the site, you can edit every one of them so it goes out in your voice. You can see a couple of accessibility features here on the front page, like Google Translate. So if you are working with users that may not have English as their first language, you can select which languages are available in there. The page itself has space for you to add some extra information, links, videos, whatever content you want. And there's space at the bottom as well to add things like a Twitter feed or latest opportunities, whatever it is you happen to want to pop in there. We've got a search engine on this front page where you can search using your voice, you can search using keywords, you can search using opportunity name, you can search the things you can do from home or any location that appears in on Google Maps. And there's some extra stuff in here that the volunteers can do. I'm going to hit the search button here. And it's going to take me a whole, okay, I'm not sure you get any open opportunities. We'll see in a second. Should have checked this before I came on the call.
I should do. I should have lots.
There they are, brilliant. And you can see here on the opportunity page, there's lots of different views. You can look where they are on a map, by category, by organisation, by tag. And the opportunities present with an image at the top. You can add opportunity badges, which is another way for volunteers to be able to identify if an opportunity is suitable for them. The opportunity's got a title, a description. And again, depending on how you choose to create your opportunities, they have benefits and perks, skills, restrictions, other opportunities that are similar to the one you're looking at. We also have a TripAdvisor feature, which is where volunteers have said nice things about your opportunities. We show future volunteers that little bit of information. That's something you can turn on or off, and Kate's got turned off currently. And the way that we create the opportunities, you can create them as sessions, you can create them as individual sessions, repeating sessions, one-offs. You can create them as what we call flexible opportunities, where it's not so much time fixed, but it's between this date and date X and date Y. The idea for the volunteer, you can also share by your socials. The idea for a volunteer, when they come along here, they can also see who's offering the opportunity within your organisation. They can print off the opportunity. You can pop it on a notice board with a nice QR code in there so people can get back to the system and sign up. We've got a map, and if I was logged in, it would also give me directions on how to get there. And if you pay expenses to your volunteers, it'll tell you how much expenses you should be paying in terms of mileage. So I come along here and I say, oh, like, look at this one. I want to register. I can hit the register button. And I can register using Google, Facebook, or using an email address. Now, if I happen to be someone more like my dad, who isn't particularly IT savvy, and I've walked into one of your venues and I'm having a chat with one of your members of staff, I can be registered on my behalf without an email address, and the system will let you know to pick up the phone and ring me or send me a text message from the system rather than relying on me getting emails. So we've tried to build the system to be as accessible and inclusive as possible for people that may not necessarily be that digitally engaged with you. We recognise that, you know, we're all on a journey. These digital tools, some are a bit further along than others. If I hit the Google register with Google button, and I pick one of my Google accounts here, this will confirm that I've got a real email address, and it'll take me into Kate's registration form. And from here, you can decide which of these fields you want turned on or off. You can decide what additional fields, what additional questions you may want to answer, may want to ask the question. You can decide whether or not these are required fields or whether or not they're nice to haves. You can decide what's in the drop-down menus, and where you have preferred things like preferred to self-describe. It pops out a box where volunteers can do that. And this whole process is customizable. And then down at the bottom, we've talked a little bit about compliance and governance. We cover things like GDPR, so the volunteers have to tick the terms and conditions. It's your data, not our data. It belongs to you guys, not us. And we get this special consent here that the volunteer is happy that the data they share in the system can be shared with the people they go and volunteer with. So whoever your local volunteer manager might be at the particular venue or the particular opportunity that's being run, you know, there's a subset of data that's available to that person that's going to be managing that volunteer locally. And I hit the registration button, which I'm not going to because I'll be a made-up volunteer in Kate's system. I'll very quickly jump into the back end. Go. Now, you'd think after 15 years of doing this job, I would be able to type and talk, but I can't. It's still beyond my my skill set, so I have to really concentrate. We're into the admin back end of the system now, and the first thing that you're welcome with is basically a set of to-dos. You know, things that are happening today, providers that might be waiting for access, any chat messages, because we've got a chat function built into the system, and what's happened since the last time you logged onto the system. We've got the activity page, which is similar, showing you little jobs that you may need to have a look at, contact us, emails, those kind of things. You can look at your own opportunities. And you can see where Kate's got her volunteers, and they all look very healthily attended. Them, Kate, we like that. That's they're all nice numbers. The idea is that you have all these dashboards that make your life that little bit easier. You can go in there from here and manage your opportunities individually and see which volunteers are on opportunities. You can see how many people have been viewing your opportunities. You can see which volunteers are on which sessions, and you can add and remove volunteers to sessions. You can go and log your hours and say thank you to your volunteers. You're in your chat room, you want to chat with them. All those features are there to try and help you manage your volunteers. When you've got a volunteer in the system, we can see how many hours they've done, when they're volunteering. You can remove them from the session. I'm going to go and have a look at this volunteer's profile very, very quickly. I'm going to impersonate this volunteer here. And from here, super simple. I can act on behalf of this volunteer. I can support this volunteer if for some reason they're having a few problems using the system themselves. And this is what the volunteer would see. They would see their upcoming sessions with hours to log, new suggestions, and all the different features they can access from claiming expenses and looking at emails you sent them are all available on the left there. And we can see that this particular volunteer is one of our Hall of Famers. And she's got 782 hours that she's logged herself, the 750.5 hours that have been confirmed, and 14 thumbs up. So this volunteer is a superstar. That is a very, very quick show around the site itself. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask us?
Do you want to stop sharing your screen for a moment, Chris, and then we can take some questions from the floor? And are all three of you happy to take questions just to check? Fab, lovely. All right, does anyone have any questions in the room? I shall change the view. I have a few questions if anyone else doesn't, so I'm ready to go while I change the view.
Go for it, Matt.
Yeah. First of all, a great presentation, and the system looks absolutely fantastic. Kate, you touched a little bit on this, but I just wondered if you could give us a bit of a sense of actually how long it takes to, I guess, kind of migrate from maybe a system that you're on at the moment to a new system. What's that? Weeks, months, days, years? I don't know.
Sorry, was that for me, Matt?
Yourself, Kate, or Chris? Right there.
Do you want to go first, Kate? Because you've lived it and breathed it.
It depends where you are, doesn't it? So we were in a funny position, like I say, because we were kind of like at the back end of COVID, and we were quite low on numbers. So I suppose it is very dependent on kind of like where you are currently, really. I'm not too sure how long it would take if you were already on a different system. I suppose, Chris, you can add on that.
So from our standpoint, again, Kate's bang on with what she said. It does depend where you are, but if your data is in a system already and it's relatively organized, then we can migrate that data into the system very, very quickly. And getting your volunteer data and getting your opportunity provider data, the other people offering the opportunities into the system, is very, very quick, very, very easy. The bit that takes a bit of time to set up is your actual opportunities for your volunteers to go on to. So they do need recreating in Kinetic to make sure they fit the structure that we have. We suggest that we can have you up and running to the point where you can start to populate the system within 2 to 3 weeks. After that 2 to 3 weeks, we suggest anything up to 12 weeks to get the system populated with your data and make sure you and your teams are comfortable using the system. So we suggest a 3-month implementation, but getting the system ready for you to start, if you'll start actively using, ready for launch, we can have you up and running into that situation in 2 to 3 weeks. So that's what we tend to aim for. It's a day and a half of training for most people in the first instance, and then we're quickly trying to sort of get you into that situation where you're playing around with the system and getting comfortable with it, and then starting to create the opportunities and starting to invite your various teams, your various volunteer managers to try it out for themselves and create their opportunities. And yeah, we like the sort of learning by playing around with it approach.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. That's great. Thanks, Kate, as well.
Vanessa, I think you got your hand up after second.
I did. Thank you, Chris. Quick question. Obviously, from a GDPR point of view, we've got, and because of our funders, we have to request a certain amount of information from our volunteers, and some of that information is quite sensitive, and so therefore we hide that information from anybody else that's administrating or looking after them. Looking at all the data that you were collecting for your volunteers on the system with Kate, I noticed that there was a tick box about obviously giving permission for volunteer managers to see that data, but can you restrict some of that data? Because some of our volunteer managers are quite sensitive to seeing personal data.
You can. So there is a sort of default set of data which tends to be name. We don't share date of birth. We do share age. We because a number of opportunities tend to be sensitive to that with some of our clients. We share previous volunteer history, previous qualification history. So there's a subset that is by default, but there is a little bit of control over some of those things that you can turn on or off. We don't tend to show address unless it's turned on and you want to share address. So it does vary a little bit by client by client. As you can imagine, national organisation like Historic Environment Scotland is a bit different to a single location client that may be less location sensitive. So, but yeah, there is some controls over what data is shared.
Okay, and if I can, I've got one more question. I have a few questions, but I got one more that I just would really like to ask. Situation about when a volunteer applies to a role, obviously they've registered on the system. If they actually are in the process of applying for one role, but then they see another role that they like as well, can you see them actually on those different roles each time, or is it only the one application coming through?
No, that's exactly how it works. So again, because the system is primarily built to, the first instance is built to be self-service. So we as in Team Kinetic don't see any problem with volunteers seeing lots of opportunities and saying they want to do lots of things. That can be problematic sometimes for you guys as volunteer managers, because people can be a bit giddy and sign up for everything everywhere and then not turn up for anything. And that can be a bit of a problem. So the system is built that volunteers can see what's on offer. You can make different things more visible. You can make things what we call open or closed. And if things are closed, they don't appear in your search engine, for example. So you can decide what's open for a volunteer to see. And volunteers can then opt to say they want to join an opportunity. Now, that joining process may be first come, first served, or it may be an applying process. So you've got a couple of different methods to make sure, one, you've got the right onboarding in place before that volunteer gets onto that opportunity. And two, there is a process to make sure you've got the right people on the opportunity. So you can also restrict access based on whether they've got a DBS, whether or not they're a member of a particular group you set up, whether or not they've got a particular qualification, whether or not they are over a particular age or under a particular age. So you can create a whole series of restrictions. And we have another feature called roles, that when a volunteer tries to join an opportunity, it will take them on a role onboarding journey to make sure they've done the appropriate steps for that role, which might be get their DBS, shadow an existing volunteer, fill in this training material. So you can also create these journeys, these workflows, if you will, for volunteers to join particular opportunities that have a more demanding onboarding journey than just first come, first served. So there's a range and a variety of firewalls and protections to make sure you get the right person in the right place. But going back to what you said, volunteers can be on 1, 2, 3, 15, 500 opportunities over their lifetime or simultaneously. You know, we kind of, that's what we want to see, really. That's a good volunteer life cycle.
Exactly. Okay, great.
I mean, that's a really good question, Vanessa. And I know Chris is so passionate about lots of volunteers doing lots of different things, but I think as volunteer managers, we have to also sort of manage expectations. So I do put everybody in groups. So people do get very giddy and they'll be like, oh, I want to do this. And I'm like, well, no, we've just recruited you. So we always say, just focus on that one role. So they might try and join it, but if I've grouped them correctly, then they can't. And then it's a conversation with, just settle into that role, and then we can look at kind of growing it. Because I think our job as volunteer managers, you have to be realistic, don't you? And you have to manage expectations, but you also have to manage your workload. And if you've got lots of new volunteers starting who want to do like lots of different things, then it's quite tricky, isn't it? So yeah, the system does work though to back that up, but there is that temptation to see these quite sort of tempting roles, and yeah, you do have to kind of like rein people in a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, just to clarify from that perspective, we get a lot of student graduates apply to us for different roles, and obviously they can actually fit themselves into entomology, or they can actually fit into coleoptera or whatever, and it's enabling those students to be able to apply for those different roles because of the fact is that they've got the skills spectrum to be able to manage them. But we want to be able to shortlist against each of those individual roles. Yes, whereas you're absolutely right, it's then the over exuberant volunteer who wants to apply for everything when really we need to manage their expectations and get them down to maybe one, possibly. So
yeah, that applying process is available against each individual opportunity, and you can have an applying, accepted, denied, and waiting list as well. So I refer to them as different buckets of volunteers. Maybe bucket's not the right word, but you've got the guys that have applied, the guys who accepted, the guys that have been rejected, and there's automated comms built around all that you can customize. that they say, you've been accepted, this was going to happen next, here's a video, here's it, or you've been accepted onto the role, and now you've got to do these 4 steps before then you're allowed to start going on the actual sessions associated with that role. So there's different journeys that we can help you build, during that initial implementation period to replicate the processes you have in place as an organisation.
Great. Thank you both.
No problem. If you've got more questions, Vanessa, we can come back to you in a sec. But if we let
let someone else. Let someone else.
Yeah, no problem. Marie, you've got your hand up.
Hi.
Hiya.
Really, really interesting. I guess my question's more around the structure of the system and how you structure it in terms of what admins can see what data.
Okay.
In terms of, so for instance, we have multiple sites across the UK. At the moment, it's structured at a site level, but ideally I'd prefer it to be at a team level so that the volunteer team would be able to see their particular team's worth of volunteers data.
Yes.
How does it structure on Team Kinetic?
That's a great question, to be fair. There's a couple of options again. There's always a couple of options. I apologize, as I said, that's the start of every answer. Within Kinetic, we have 3 distinct user types. You've got volunteers, you've got opportunity providers, and you've got admins. Okay. Volunteers, pretty straightforward who they are. They create their account and they find the opportunities they want to do, or you put them on the opportunities you want them to do. Not a problem. Their account is distinct and it's just for them to say they want to join things. Opportunity providers are, in essence, the lowest level of admin, if I had to describe them as something. And an opportunity provider, they can create opportunities, they can see the volunteers that sign up to their opportunities, and they can manage those volunteers that are on their opportunities, but they can't edit their core details, generally speaking. We do have some privilege control around that, what we call a trusted provider level, which lets you edit certain fields, but you get a much more reduced view of that volunteer. You can only see your volunteers as an opportunity provider. You can't see anybody else's volunteers. That's the key distinction. I know an opportunity provider could have 1, 2, 3, 5, 500, 5,000 opportunities under their banner. And you can have more than one person operating as an opportunity provider. So you may have 4 people in the team that are operating at that opportunity provider level. They're not, as we consider them, admin level users, so you don't get billed for them. Again, you can have as many of them as you want as well. So it doesn't affect your pricing there either. So if you're set up as teams at venues, then your opportunity providers may be the venue names. And this is when we work with the Youth Hostel Association, each of their venues is an opportunity provider. And they've got 1 or 2 people named at each of those venues. They can go in and manage the volunteers there locally. And they create the opportunities at that venue level. So that's one way. If that doesn't quite fit as you want, we have a secondary level within the admins. Admins can see all the volunteers and admins can see all the opportunities. But we have a thing called pods, where you can create a pod admin that has control over a group of predefined opportunity providers. So we're getting into the really technical stuff now, but what that basically means is rather than an admin being able to see everybody and do everything to everybody, you decide who they actually have control over and which of those in your case, maybe venues that particular person has direct control and can edit and change and move them around. They can't then go and accidentally delete somebody from somebody else's pod. And pods work really well for departments. They work really well for regions. So that's we couldn't work with a better name than pod that sort of encompass the different use cases for it. But that sort of gives you enough structure there out of the box. And then within that, within the pod and we've got pod admin, system admin, super admin that come as standard. One of the pieces of work on our roadmap at the minute is giving even more controls on the privileges that those admins get. If you are a larger organization like you guys are, we can also link that admin accounts and those provider accounts to your single sign-on. So if you use something like Microsoft Teams, they'll be able to log in with their same Teams account and it will check. And if they leave the organization, it will automatically delete it from Kinetic at the same time. So for large organizations at that enterprise level, we support a lot of those enterprise tools to make sure it makes your job a little bit easier, keeping on top of all that stuff.
No, that's really, really useful, actually. I also have one other question really quickly. I just saw quickly on the tab, it said expenses. Is there expenses in the system?
There is. Now, it's a relatively new, well, Expense has been in there for quite a few years, but we've developed that expense module out last year, where you can collect a photograph of the expense, name, a nominal code, date, time, opportunity it was associated with, all that information you need. What tends to happen again at an enterprise level is we would work with you to work out what format you need that to be produced for your finance department, and then we'll produce a custom built report that you'll be able to send to them on a weekly, monthly, however often you need to do it, directly to them in the format they want, so they can feed into their finance system. We can do it in a standard format if organisations are maybe not as that don't need such a formal relationship. That's sort of available out of the box. But if you want it to be really seamless, then we work with you to make sure that the expense output pushes directly into whatever finance system you've got.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
Lovely. Well, believe it or not, we've just passed 4 o'clock already, so I'm going to draw it to a close. A huge thank you to Chris and Alex from Team Kinetic, but also Kirsty and Kate for providing their real-world experiences of the system, because that's absolutely vital. I have one last question, which is, Chris, if people want to chat to you further about the system and what it means for them, what should they do next?
So let me just flip to my final slide. We're offering all HVG members 25% discount off a Team Kinetic subscription. So that's the first thing. For the next 3 months, that offer's in place as a thank you for having us. I'm sure we'll find some other offers over the time we work with you guys, but so that's in there. If people do want to speak to us, they can contact me at info@teamkinetic.co.uk or on any of our socials. Matt will be joining us on the podcast, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to subscribe to that, we're on Spotify. You can find us there. But yeah, if you want to speak to us, it's teamkinetic.co.uk for the website. From there, you can start a free trial. We have a 30-day money-back guarantee after you've had your free trial anyway. So we really try to make you feel as comfortable as you can trying this stuff out. And the telephone number's there on the slide as well. So you can always feel free to. Nobody gives me a call anymore. Please feel free to give me a call.
We can't see it. We can't see your slide, Chris, but I have just popped your email into the chat.
That again. How's that? Can you see that now? Is that there?
Yes, we can. Grab a shot, people. Anyone who's interested. Lovely. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for your generosity with the offer as well. I popped just a moment ago the next HVG event, which is this Friday, an inclusion forum at 10 o'clock. Otherwise, we will head off from here. The recording will be available soon on YouTube. And yes, thank you again, Chris, Kirsty, Kate, Alex. Lovely to have seen you today. Thanks so much, and have a lovely rest of your Tuesdays. Take care, everyone.
Great session. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time. Bye. How did that go? Was that okay?
Sorry, just checking that we didn't have any randoms in here. Matt's headed out already. Look at him, eager beaver. Yeah, I think so.
No, he's a busy man.
Yeah, it's always really difficult, isn't it? Because you've got people in completely different stages of systems. You've got Vanessa, who's got a system. You've got me, who's not got one and is playing the field at the minute. And you've got various other people who are in the room as well. So really interesting. And I think it is quite a dynamic. It's quite a dynamic field. People aren't people aren't staying wedded to a system forever and ever. People are happy to move around and change things up a little bit.
Yeah, we're big fans of that as well. We think it's better for the market if the customer's got more freedom, more choice. It stops the trusty encumbrance, hanging around. We want that.